Hey, hi everyone, you're very welcome. My name is Donna Lyons. I'm very excited to introduce renowned international animator Gísli Darri Halldórsson, who will speak about his Oscar-nominated short film, Yes People, and other work. This film is available on YouTube, and the link is in the write-up for this event for anyone who's interested in watching it after this. Fionn Klisman will be introducing Gísli further and asking some questions. And Fionn is an Irish concept artist and a visual effects artist whose practice is focused on the appreciation and celebration of life. So I'll hand it over to you, Fionn.
Thanks a lot, Donna, and thanks, Gísli, for coming. So to introduce Gísli to people who might know not that much about him, he is from Iceland, and you could say by now a veteran animator, maybe. You might have heard of him this year because his short film, Yes People, was nominated for an Oscar. And this was on the back of many years of work. So he, before university, did some commercial and advertising work, and then he came to Ireland to study at Ballyfermot College of Further Education, which he finished in 2007. And right out of college, he did some 3D modeling work on Granny O'Grim's Sleeping Beauty for Brown Bag Films, which was also nominated for an Oscar. And then he moved into animation at Brown Bag, working on Olivia and Noddy in Toyland, and into feature films with Icelandic studio Chaos. From then he moved on to some studios in London, like Blue Zoo and Cartoon Network, working on Amazing World of Gumball, which brings us all the way up to 2016. And then he worked on another feature film, Pluie, and Yes People was finished in 2020. And his most recent credit is for The Adventures of Paddington. So thanks a lot for coming, Gísli. And yeah, I have some, I guess, pretty deep questions after working a little bit on this kind of stuff myself. So I really loved the movie, and thanks for bringing it into the world. I was noticing that, like, even though it has very solid themes, there were some parts that really drew audiences in that weren't really directly related to the themes, but more like funny moments, like somebody playing on a recorder badly, or poor soundproofing with the neighbors. Can you talk about that kind of more open side of your creativity and where that came in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, and for the lovely words. Yeah, we talked about the sliding camera, and it happened. I have my phone here. Sorry.
Okay.
Very exciting. This is off to a good start. In Iceland, we say fall farar heill, which means falling is good luck for the journey. So this is going to be, I'm probably going to win the lottery during this event. Yeah, so yeah, it was a kind of a personal film, believe it or not. So I knew it was kind of mundane, and the topic is a bit dull, and it's about repetition and routine and sort of the everyday, and I just knew I had to put some funny moments in there to make it kind of bearable. And they're sort of loosely linked to repetitions, those scenes you mentioned. Like, the overall theme was sort of like being stuck in a loop and not progressing anywhere in life, and I feel like that sort of thing doesn't really apply to children. So hence I put the kid learning the recorder, because that's where you can see immense improvement. Obviously us adults do it as well, but it was sort of like a representation of that aspect of routines and repetition. I'd say the whole film is really just like a portrait of repetition. It's sort of in the center, and all the characters reflect this theme in one way or the other. I also, I'm kind of glad that you say also that it didn't really, it's not necessarily obvious thematically, because I kind of like those sort of films, like the Coen brothers, where where you have, you know, it's almost like when everything is supporting a theme, it just becomes predictable and a little bit boring. And the filmmakers that I admire, they sort of throw little banalities into the mix, and it's sort of surprising elements. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that really reminds me of intermission. It's kind of a famous Irish issue that we always bring loads of different themes together. So I hope you picked that up here. It's very classically Irish. So yeah, like a project like this probably contains lots of like influences from people you worked with over the years. Like you're talking this kind of potpourri. Were there any particular parts you made that reminded you of particular people you worked with?
Oh yeah, it's a total mix of people I know. Some are like, most of them are like two people into one, and it's yeah, nobody's really one person, I'd say, but yeah, definitely. I mean, I want to get as a eclectic bunch of people as possible to because I want to be about people, and but also the real challenge about making the film was doing a short about a lot of people. You get into sort of stereotype territory, and it's very hard to show depth in such a short amount of time. But I did write a huge backstory to all these characters, so and some of them are kind of based on people that I know, like as you said. So I hope that shines through. But I wrote that much material that I actually this short is almost like a pilot for a bigger universe.
So what did you find were like the most critical aspects for communicating a character's inner world quickly to the viewers?
I think it's just getting the energy between the characters, showing the energy between the characters, and showing that they're thinking and breathing, and yeah, it's like, as an animator, it used to be, sorry for the pause, as an animator, it used to be my goal as an animator was to make characters look like they're thinking, breathing, and, you know, reacting to things and trying to be constantly in the moment. But for this film, I really focused on the energy between people and trying to capture that. So so yeah, I mean, for that was I feel like that reflects the character's inner world in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you could really see it with the mother reacting, or sorry, the music teacher reacting to the boy playing the recorder, right? There's like, you know, her constant like wincing and as he gets everything slightly wrong. Worked really well. I wanted to ask you about the lady reading Proust. She kind of inspired me. I thought she was just really full of like life and gusto. And yeah, like, how did you kind of go about getting that sense of like spontaneity and energy into her?
Yeah, that's based on a lot of older ladies that I know and I've observed. It's something to look up to, I think, in older years, because there's something about older women where they've just had it. They're just like, screw this is bullshit. I'm going to do my thing. And I see that less with older men. I don't know why. I think it's maybe because maybe women go through more cycles or something. I'm in dangerous territory trying to say what women feel like, but it's just based on my observation of, I just know, and they're just fantastic characters. You know, they're just And you know, I've seen, because I'm already 40, so I've seen these people sort of transition from somebody who's working in an office and conforming, and then near retirement, there seems to be like a switch. It's like, hang on, what have I been doing? And just kind of like, yeah, just life is bullshit. And I mean, it's not bullshit, but all these rules and all this stuff that I've been putting myself into has all been crap. And now I'm just gonna do whatever I want, and I'm in charge, and Proust is funny, and you know, even though he's very serious, it's a kind of a joke. Proust has a piece where he does a meditation on wasted time. That's sort of, I've been asked so many times about why I put it in there. That's one reason, and the other reason is I feel like if you can read something serious as him and sort of laugh, it's almost like a reflection of how you live your life.
Yeah.
How you should live your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, in many ways, she reminds, like what you're just talking about there, reminds me of Granny O'Grim, right? In The Sleeping Beauty, like this granny talking about, God damn these young fairies, they don't invite me over. Screw this. Yeah, I know. I find that very what's the word? Empathic. So I was wondering then, like when you are talking about these constant repetitions in life, and then, you know, looking at kind of what's maybe the deeper or bigger themes, do you feel like, you know, if this is influenced a bit by literature, do you feel like animation could do more of this kind of philosophical exploration for people's deeper meanings in their life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Maybe because I feel like animation hasn't really reached its potential, and it's only now a little bit we're seeing a bit more. You know, that film that won at Cannes, the I Lost My Body or something, where, you know, budgets are kind of, first of all, where audience is a bit more forgiving with style and quality, or, you know, production quality, not quality, like production quality, and tools are getting a bit cheaper. So now maybe people with money, it seems like they're not so pressed about making a film that has to appeal to everybody, kids, parents, and everybody. So we might be going into a territory where animation can start to say more things. But I really believe that, but I don't think it can maybe go to the depths that a book can. Like when you read a book, you just go into the inner core of your mind. It's so it's such a different experience. Maybe and animation is maybe so far a medium of ideas and sort of clarification. I don't know. Yeah, and yeah, but the levels that a book can take you is just different. Yeah, I kind of look at all the art forms as just like this hall of mirrors, and they all kind of reflect a different type, or not a hall of mirrors, you know, those sort of skewed mirrors, and they bring something out of life for you. So music kind of brings something very specific to you, and that's its strength. And then there's literature and maybe animation. I feel like that's one of the few mirrors that hasn't been defined completely yet, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's just something necessary to, maybe that's just a necessary feeling for me to cope, to continue making animation and feeling like there's something
I mean,
to
it would
strive
definitely
for.
inspire somebody to go in that direction, right? Feeling like all that new open territory. I know a lot of people moved into graphic novels and comics for that exact reason. They felt that whole potential was still there. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Actually, yeah, I a little bird told me that you have a love of music, and you always felt like there had to be a good synergy between the music and the visual part if animation is in this hall of mirrors, and you're trying to bring the mirrors together. Could you talk a bit about like music in Yes People and your feeling about music and animation in general?
Sure. Yeah, the music in Yes People was directly. It came really early on. It was a no-brainer, really. It's a very famous song in Iceland from the 60s, and it was actually commissioned for a film, and I was just attracted to it exactly for the reason that the singer isn't singing any words, and it's just one sound syllable, and she kind of brings out so many emotions and mysteries, and that's the power of music as well. Like you can listen to it over and over, and you can have a different experience. So the choice for the music was quite thematic, and because all the characters could only play or sing that song, they could only play or they could only say one word. But I've usually, in my previous work, I've been doing narrative music videos. So in those cases, I was kind of obsessed about, I didn't have a girlfriend or a kid, so I had plenty of time. I would listen to the song and just kind of close my eyes and imagine a story unfolding, and I would try to be very, it was a very enjoyable experience, but very maybe a bit backwards, because you're kind of. But it's good. It was like a daydreaming exercise, but it was kind of finding the relationship between a character and an instrument in the composition of the film, and so that was my earlier part. But the choice of music in Yes People is a bit different. But I really to continue on the subject of where animation can go. Personally, and probably others feel the same way. Animation takes such a long time to make that it just seems really essential that, or it seems really not important. What's the word? It's essential to make animated film that you can experience again and again, like music. That's what I like about the qualities of music, and you have such control with animation, and it just seems like such a waste if you do an animated film that people just watch once and they don't care. I spent such a long time on this film. I tried to. That was my first attempt at trying to making a film like that. Sort of. My biggest compliment I've had for that film is that people have a different experience on rewatch, and they see different things, and I'm not talking about like hidden jokes in the background. It's just kind of emotional, and because things aren't underlined and put, things aren't explained maybe terribly. There's a lot of small gestures. People maybe pick up on them more on multiple viewings.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it myself more than once for that exact reason.
Oh, great! So, that's great.
I was really curious about, because there's so many light and dark aspects. So, for example, one of the ones that really struck me was the lady who's dealing with alcoholism, because a lot of people in lockdown have been hit by it. And it's a problem we had here. Actually, in our graduate show, you might have seen there was somebody who made a film about alcoholism as part of all this. And I was wondering, they say like addiction and isolation are two sides of the same coin. Could you talk a bit about how she seems really isolated from her husband, the lady who's drinking all the time?
Yeah. Well, I can just say that the backstory is kind of constructed. It's like a typical relationship that just where people drift apart, and they end up finding other ways to fill up the void, and it's just one of those. It's the dark side of the cycles, because routine, when we say the word routine, it can, depending on who you are, you could be like, oh, that's boring. And if you say to especially really, like athletes or something, they'll get really interested, like, yeah, what's your routine? And so it's a very multi-meaning word. But yeah, so their story is kind of reflecting the dark side of that, and how you kind of spiral inwards. Like with food, very often I can just say, like, people my age were like, weightlifting, so they had to eat a lot to maintain the muscle mass, and they attract girls that way, and then they end up with someone who is attracted to them for that reason, maybe for only that reason, because that's what they focused on. And then at a certain time, they don't have time, or maybe there's a back problem or something, and they can't do the same rigorous weightlifting anymore, but the stomach wants the same amount of food, and it's a terrible, awful it's those sort of things that I was attracted to as well.
I mean, there's also, there's a lot of room for dark and also comedy kind of mixed together, and like she did a great job of kind of being both kind of slightly terrifying and highly humorous. I guess you have to laugh at this stuff in the end. So yeah, I really liked as well the kind of interiors they were in, like the old Icelandic interiors, presumably from the 70s. Could you talk a bit like what those households were like inside in Iceland?
Yeah. So first of all, those came from my father's photo archive. He was scanning them in. He had access to a lot of like, he didn't have to like be. He was really exploring the camera, like taking photos with different rooms and just exploring the camera and the shutter speed and stuff. So he had a lot of just empty rooms and sets, and he was scanning them in, and I was almost location scouting, it was very fun, I was just looking for, because he has like 80,000 scans or something, and sometimes I had to Photoshop my mother out of a photo or something. It's a bit disturbing, but
Kafkaesque or whatever.
Yeah, but he had photos from other periods, but I chose the 70s photos because for me, I don't know why, but there's something about the color palette and the design and the era. The 70s to me seems like the dark ages of the 20th century. There's something very imposing. I love the design from that period, but there's something about I don't want to be in those spaces for a long time. That color palette, the browns, the moss green, the yellow and orange, kind of a little bit desaturated and dark and sort of heavy, and it just felt like the right setting for people who can't deal with the everyday, being kind of stuck in that world. And so that was the main reason why I chose that 70s.
I mean, growing up, those were the interiors I started into, so it definitely feels like prehistory for me as well.
Yeah.
And in Eastern Europe, when I was there, they still had a lot of those old interiors, so I totally know what you mean.
It's also a period where like now it seems like where most of us are just dealing with maybe anxiety is like the most typical normal people everyday sort of thing. Like when I was a kid, and maybe you had the same, the boredom was just, the feeling of being bored was awful, and now I don't feel bored anymore. I'm very quick to find, so I want to avoid this period as well. So that's why I didn't do this period, because it just feels like it's a different beast, the everyday. It's before, yeah, I just want to focus on that.
Yeah, I mean,
without mobile phones and smartphones and all the things that are on offer to us. Maybe that's the sequel.
The sequel could be this lockdown year.
Yeah.
We had to do a lot of interior photography for the same reason, just documenting that feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was wondering about like newer technologies. Do you like, when you're talking about these subtle impressions from characters, do you ever think you would move into motion capture for, you know, bringing in actors in, or do you prefer to? Would you think you would stay with hand animating, looking at footage, or?
I'd probably just do either live action or animation, not motion capture. Because what I like about animation is that extraction of truth, and we just don't have those sort of Chaplin actors anymore that can just do such a precise performance. I mean, maybe we do, but I don't have access to them. And I can do animation, so I'll do that. But yeah, I'm not against motion capture though, but I don't think I would have any. It's never occurred to me actually to do motion capture. But I know the I know, like, ever since when my film started to go to the festivals, I remember people sort of talking about the fact that it's an everyday subject, and it's a very odd thing to say, but sometimes it felt like it almost feels like punk, like punk rock, to be doing an animation about a dull, everyday routine thing, because it's like, if you do animation, you should do fantasy and something that can't be done with live action, and you know, impossible things. Like, the short could have been done in live action, but you wouldn't have had that shorthand characters, that sort of immediate, I know who this is, and the detail, you know, the caricature, and yeah, that sort of extraction of truth that you can have in animation that I'm just so attracted to.
Yeah, I remember that famous animator Alberto Mieglo. He was talking about he does the kind of punk style, and he was also talking about like how he was like, no more just 3D animals. Like, please let me show what animation can actually do.
Yeah.
So I can feel there's kind of a widespread revolution pushing for this, which is pretty exciting, to be honest. Do you ever like, so what kind of software do you use? Do you kind of stick to what you think will train you best for like the industry standard, or do you like to use like free Blender software, for example, or how do you go about making an independent film?
Yeah, most of my work is in Maya. I've had to go the whole circle. From beginning, I was in Max and Softimage, and then most of the work seems to be in Maya so far. I really like Blender. It's just at the moment there's not a lot of work in it, but I'm sure it's gonna change. I've seen some projects with, I know bigger studios are looking at it, but I don't know. It's all really such a cliche. It's all really the same. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's
sorry, just as a the Blender, I'm just on the last point. This Blender coming in is definitely gonna push that revolution of, you know, well, my if animation is gonna take us some bigger steps, it's probably Blender will probably be there in the history book of why it happened.
We're all like jumping between, is it is it Blender, is it Maya, is it going to be Unreal in real time? And like everybody's just trying to prepare for any of one of a number of futures. It feels like there's a few companies that want to take over the world, and we're not sure which world we're going to end up in.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I guess it's a bigger question for somebody coming out of college. I understand. Yeah. I'd say, I mean, at the moment, I think Maya is pretty dominant, at least in character animation, and I guess Unreal is more for games and such.
Did you go through a period of working on rigging?
Very little, not as a job, just, you know, maybe helping out a little bit for like in smaller studios, or polishing my own rigs maybe, but very little. I had very little. It was just sort of band-aid rigging, more like probably could have done something in 10 minutes, which I did in 2 hours. Absolutely.
I know that feeling. So when you were working, you know, because I heard it took like 8 years to make this movie, so that's a long drive. And you probably came back to it multiple times. Did you notice like over that there were some like core skills that turned out to be like kind of central to getting a project like this up off the ground and actually happening?
You know, I think what really helped me do this over the period was I realized that I was doing a lot of work on my blog. It was a lot of small pleasures putting stuff out, and I love doing it. But then I remember, you know, being that sort of guy at the water cooler at work, you know, saying, you know, I really want to do an animated short, and just saying it too many times and wanting it for too long can become toxic within you, you know, when you don't do anything about it. And having too much inspiration and no perspiration, it's just pent up inspiration that's starting to rot inside you. So I remember there was a point where I said, okay, if I use the time that I'm spending on my blog stuff on a film, I would actually just do a film. It's the same amount of work. I just have to kind of abandon that pleasure of having put something else out and getting feedback or likes or whatever. The second one, I think, was you asked about skill. For me, what really carried me through this film was finding meaning and making my time working on the film meaningful. It's a very vague thing to say, but it was a very hard film to finish, and I had really difficult times. But because the subject matter was something that I was quite obsessive about and inspired by, which was routines. Like how do you my general worry about sort of living my life in a loop and wasting my life. So I, you know, just by sort of working on something that is talking about that subject, or, you know, is very healing. And so if I were to give anyone advice about making a long-term project like that, would be to find something you really, really care about, really kind of obsessed about, actually. And also, you know, the hard thing, of course, is doing work on it regularly. I read a book about, I was reading a book about like artists and scientists and politicians that had their routines. It's a very funny book. I can't remember what it's called. I'm sure it's Googleable, but it was just some reporter or journalist who had gathered all these stories, and some of them were quite amusing, and they were very different. But what shined through was just that everybody had their routine that was designed to help them make that thing that they wanted to make, or to do that thing they wanted to do. And 10 minutes a day is very powerful, extremely. Like, if you are really tired at the end of your day and you don't have any energy left to, you shouldn't, of course, burn out, but if you can do 10 minutes and a day for a week, you look back at that 70-minute period that you worked on it, and you start to see, you really start to feel it. And I mean, that's what I did. I was just doing poses, before bed. I'd practice drawing the characters in different poses and figuring out who they were. I was and just by creating this rhythm, the subconscious seems to tune into a frequency where it just goes, oh, there's an idea about this theme or this character. It's almost like just tuning into a frequency, and these things just start to come if you do it for long enough, or do it consistently enough. Yeah, so I'd say that's a skill. It's a kind of a, and I just want to end with the point how happy I was making the film. I got nominated for an Oscar, and it was overwhelmingly joyous, but I swear there are times where I was writing and storyboarding the film underneath a staircase in the National Gallery in London, where they had amazing coffee and a lot of silence. And I was so happy, like, doing that. I was just, okay, it's great to be nominated for an Oscar. I'm not gonna take it down, but it's so important to be happy what you're doing as well. And I also should really be responsible by stressing that it was also extremely hard making the film. Like, some of the obstacles were really painful, and but I guess it's what's kind of on your side is the fact that you don't have a deadline, really. Like, you can just plow through. So tomorrow is another day, as they said in Gone with the Wind.
Thanks, that's really inspiring, and I can totally see how that kind of comes into the film later. I mean, that's why you want to rewatch it. You can feel that atmosphere kind of bubbled out of. Yeah, I was wondering, like, when you're designing the characters and stuff, do you try to let yourself be, like, very open to different sources of inspiration, or do you have, like, kind of very systematic approach of how you approach each one individually?
No, I don't have any systematic approach. I think what I'm a little bit addicted to now is limitations. I think they're extremely helpful. We live in a time where options are abundant, and some of us have 150 tabs open every day and we don't even have time to finish reading or going through them. And we're just kind of, so it's quite, I think if there's anything that is anything, if my creative process is any at all, it would be put limitations on yourself, because it will help you become creative. Actually, if you can do whatever you want, I don't see that as creativity, because there's no restraints to be creative in. I've often used this analogy of, like, football. I don't know if you like football or soccer or basketball, but they're all exciting. One of the reasons they're exciting games is because they're in a box. The ball can't go outside the box, so you have to be creative. You can't take many steps with a ball when you're playing basketball. All these limitations make the games exciting for people, and they also make the players creative. If you imagine a game that had no rules, it would be kind of boring, because there's no tension, and people wouldn't know how to start. I don't know. I think probably if an interesting thought experiment, if that would happen, probably the rules would slowly but surely appear from over time, because that's
just
our tendency.
Even for the sake of consistency. Yeah.
John, will
so,
we take a question or two? What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, if we have, let's do it. Let's go for it.
There's actually only one, and then we can come back to the rest of
Cool.
you in a second. But anyone else who has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A tab. Brendan McCool says, really interesting stuff. Thanks, Brendan. And anonymous attendee asks or notes that the absence of dialogue in the film suggests that the film is aimed at a global audience, while the environment is rather Scandinavian. What do you think that, say, an African audience would take from the film?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I kind of went. I went into this not sure. I was sort of hoping it would be really universal. It seems to communicate. Like, I know in Japan it was really received positively. It does feel geographic sometimes, how the positivity comes from certain geographic locations. So I haven't done the study. Sadly, it hasn't really been shown in anywhere in Africa, I believe. It was mixed in South America. There was some very positive from Mexico and Argentina, and then people didn't seem to get it in Brazil. I remember it was some, so I'm very curious about it myself. But I kind of just based it on, this primal language that we seem to have, and we seem to be born with. I noticed that with my daughter, she was picking up all these very specific tones to communicate something to me. So I thought, it must be. So I kind of just went into the deep end, not being sure, but it seems to have kind of communicated mostly.
That's fascinating. Donald asks, would you say that the long tradition of Icelandic storytelling has influenced your work? And then if someone were to watch all your work without sound, is there anything that would make them say that was created by an Icelander?
Cool question. I think if I was influenced by Icelandic storytelling, I would say yes, because Icelandic films tend to be set in the countryside, and I did for a while. I was like, I just want to see an Icelandic film set in boring suburbs, and there's a lot of Icelandic films in countryside. If they can see a recurring theme with, did he say with, could see that?
Sorry, yes. If someone were to watch all your work without sound, is there anything that would make them say that was created by an Icelander?
I'm not sure. Maybe. Iceland doesn't have a very big animation heritage. There's a few shorts and a couple of films, but they're highly influenced from other. They're not very Icelandic, I'd say. Some of the shorts, but probably not. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not for me to say. If I had said it in the countryside, I think yes.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, and maybe it's quite Nordic in the sense that Nordic films tend to be very low on vocabulary.
Okay.
Or talk.
I wanted to jump in with a really quick question there, just while we're talking about the Icelandic traditions, because I was wondering, and I know Fiona asked you about music, but I was wondering whether more modern music or Icelandic music specifically, has influenced your work. Because I know Björk would be considered one of the greatest artists of our time, and I was wondering whether the more modern Icelandic music has influenced you or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot of energy from Icelandic music. It seems to be, it's almost like food or something. It's just
Nice.
yeah. but maybe also music in general. But there is something empowering about coming from an island, from such a small island where so much good music is comes from. So I'm inspired by the wherever that energy is coming from. And maybe I'm hoping to bring it into my work as well.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Jay Annam says, very inspiring, Gísli, thank you. And Nishat Shama says, giving a project 10 minutes every day sounds really effective. Did you continue doing that for a long period of time? And was there a period when you got detached from that routine? If so, what did you do to make yourself get back to that? I think we're all really inspired by that idea.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's tricky. The reason why I say, if you can find meaning in the project you're working on, it's so powerful. It's like, it's nuclear, because it keeps coming to you. It's more like you don't have to go to it. It comes to you. If you have an obsessive thought, something like that, that's really powerful. I think the problem with inspiration sometimes is that it's just like a little tickle sometimes. It doesn't always last very long. I've been saying with this project, it's a combination of inspiration and obsession. So my inspiration was the language part, the tonal language, and my obsession was the routines and maybe some ambition, as well. Of course, that helps. But an ambition to animate a lot of characters, and you have your personal goals as an artist as well. So I did have downtimes, but I didn't, especially before I got I got a grant from the Icelandic Film Fund to produce it. I mean, that really helps, of course. That really gave me the opportunity to work on it full time for a year or so. So if you can get that, of course, it will boost your boost the project. But it was an 8.5 minute long thing, and you could do something shorter as well if you can find funding, or just invest the time. Sorry, but to answer the question on when you have like a miss in the rhythm of working on it regularly. Of course, I had jobs in between, and I'd be exhausted, and then I'd take a holiday maybe, and it would I'd sort of miss a beat, but it would always be in the back of my mind. So I remember I went to Australia once, and I saw a couple of things that I jotted down. But maybe it also helped give me distance. But overall, I managed to keep up the rhythm. It is actually a really good question, because I know that feeling of, and I think the answer is just find your obsession and find the meaning in it. Does it give you personal meaning or something about it? In my case, it's sort of wrapped up in my grandparents died during the film was being written, and the older couple was slightly different in the original stages, and it just gave me a lot to just celebrate them and put their energy, something about their energy that and I think it shows up on the screen, to put that into their character.
That's amazing. Thank you for that, Gísli. And there's an anonymous attendee makes a comment saying, what Gísli said reflects Robert Moore's, and quotes, walking creates trails, trails in turn shape landscapes, and over time landscapes come to serve as archives of communal knowledge and symbolic meaning. Thank you for that. There might be time for one last question, Fionn, and then we could wrap up.
Sure. So you've been doing this freelancing and then also working on this project in the background. I was wondering, do you feel like with the success of this that you're getting more of a taste of the kind of more emotionally artistic projects that you could make, and that is there a possibility yet to live off that kind of thing? Or, and also if going through all those experiences, what would you recommend to people that they can collect as a way of still moving up in their career later on?
So what's the last part?
So, you know, as you're moving between freelancing and working on your own stuff, what would you recommend in terms of collecting different experiences that can still help you move into senior positions later on in your career?
Okay, yeah. To answer the latter, sorry, I've already forgotten the first question. I'm such a goldfish. Yeah, sorry.
It's hard to concentrate for the whole hour. Don't worry, we won't bombard you with any more after this.
That's one of my faults. I'm a complete goldfish. Collecting experiences. I think if you I mean, I think I've said this a few times before, but not here. But I think it's worth mentioning. While I was being nominated for an Oscar and being interviewed all over the place and getting a lot of praise and people like, you know, sending me lovely messages, I was still being schooled at work. I'm still like, I have 15, 16 years experience of animation, and I swear, I'm still learning from like juniors. They're still like teaching me something. I think that's, it's quite painful to be in this business sometimes because you don't really arrive, or I think you should kind of keep that approach. You have to be warm clay constantly. Don't get cool. Don't get hard. Don't harden. Don't be a hardened clay, because it's just a kind of an industry that evolves so fast and so much that you're just gonna get left behind in the end. The speed now that people are animating at versus the speed 10 years ago is quite something. New tools, new methods, new styles. I'm constantly adapting to new styles of animation, and these young whippersnappers coming up with their new plugins and showing me how to do things. It's for me, that's the main thing. It's just keeping that awareness, and don't get upset if, you know, there's a part of my ego that could have gotten very upset by somebody teaching me something, and I'm an Oscar nominee. You know, but that's not really that's not really growth inducing. You know, that would be cold clay.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I don't want to harass you with further questions. But
there was one earlier. Sorry, there was one question earlier.
Okay, it was just if you if obviously you've seen the success of this and how people are emotionally responding to it, do you feel like there is the possibility to move into like making these more emotionally connecting movies, and is that something that people could live off, or is that still very far away?
Oh yeah, I think it depends where you live. I've seen like Adrian Merigot, who did the wonderful Genius Loki, that was also nominated. He seems to, I mean, in France, they just have a better grant system for animation. And he, you know, through, I think, like, its location is a bit, I mean, we just spoke about the ability to work off-site, but you need to have a French nationality to get those grants, or I think Germany is pretty good as well. Iceland, I couldn't just do shorts through Icelandic funding. I received a third, no, a quarter of the budget, of the desired budget to finish the film. And but it really, saved me. It really saved the film. But that being said, I think there is a new era. There was just a piece on Cartoon Peru about adult content in animation, and I don't know if it was just TV shows, but there's been a few shorts on Netflix. I'm kind of hoping, the optimist in me is kind of hoping, yes, it is possible to do shorts for a living, but maybe further back in the future. And it would have to be a combination of being very creative with applying to local funds, and then to the outlets that are showing these things. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Total sense.
It's been such a privilege to talk to you. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the link to the Yes People short film is on the event right up on the website. So do take a look. And just huge thanks to you, Gísli, and to Fionn.
Thanks so much.
For everything. It's been absolutely fascinating. Is there anything else either of you would like to say before I close the session?
Just thanks for hosting me. I have such fondness for Ireland, and I absolutely love the oasis that the PAV has in Trinity College.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to welcoming you back to the PAV whenever you're back.
Amazing. I will be back for sure.
Or back to Ballyfermot.
Yeah, exactly.
See you, Gísli.
Right.
Thank you very much.
For coming.
Thanks. Bye-bye.